Here we look into rapid prototype publishing part 2. So obviously there is a part 1 as well. But we dive straight into this. Where we are publishing for the world, we take it serious, but are not shy and hampered by that, because there's so much stuff out there. So usually what we make will be used by the people we address and the social context where we operate. And we have this relationship between new genre, new ways of writing and communicating online for teaching and learning purposes. And then that is part of a publication cycle and related to the PISA model, where we go from traditional textbook into new modes where we have different kind of text, interactive texts, and use that for flipping the classroom, so to speak. So students are prepared before they come, and they use the time together for enhanced value interactions, where students have questions and they are given exercises of various kind of or practical demonstrations that they are not so easy on the web. While the thing we put on the web might, of course, demonstrate many things and show things in 2 dimensions, even 3 dimensions. And that requires a work both on the textual component of the document and all the multimedia components and learning objects. Now this requires compromise between various ways of dealing. We cannot do everything equally well, but we start somewhere and then we improve in a sort of circular process. And one of the core things we should note when it comes to the design principle is what Vygotsky called ZPD, the zone of proximal development, and that is illustrated in this, this graph here. The students, there are something they can do already, or they can do with some online materials that they can find themselves. And there's always also some things the student cannot do or don't understand. That's why they are students, they want to learn that. And there is an intermediate area here, which is called the zone of proximal development. And that is where students can manage to do if they get appropriate help. But they cannot manage that if they don't get that help. That's where we should focus our teaching and learning efforts. And also the online material should be construed so that what the students can learn on their own in a reasonably organized time span should not be put into the e-learning document. So the document itself should also sort of find that point where the student, with the help of the document, can learn, and they cannot manage on their own. And that's a demanding exercise to find that point. And that's why we have to be interactive and know quite a bit about the learning process. It's not similar to writing a book in a more general sense. It's very tightly linked to the kind of students we have, the kind of context they work with, the kind of job they are looking for in the future, etc. We have some other requirements too. The textbook, the digital textbook, should not replicate the World Wide Web or normal textbooks. You have the World Wide Web, fine, use that. You have the normal textbook, fine, use that. They should sort of make a closure towards the web, but at the same time be useful and can be used as a guide to using resources on the open web. So one of the things that students might do well on their own is to understand things they find on the web, but they have difficulty finding it, and they have difficulty evaluating if it's worthwhile to study that particular piece of information. So the digital document should be a sort of assistant on both sort of create a holistic presentation so you can be there and be taken care of, but at the same time be invited to go on the web and get some guidance in how to use that. Secondly, the digital learning material should be analytical and also descriptive in terms of describing phenomena, models, and so on and so forth, theories. With a sort of detached analytical view from the outside on the phenomena, be it in schools or in hospitals or in engineering or in other fields where there are activities out there in society that students learn about when they go to university. But on the other hand, the document should also convey impressions and engagements from inside the practicum. The inside view, not the outside, the engaged view with calls for operational and practical action. And it is in this movement between the detached, reflective, analytical point of view and the engaged, operational, identifying approach and perspective that real reflection and learning takes place. And then we can add a third dimension, or tension rather, that these texts should be serious and purposeful, precise, relevant, and we can add several more characteristics along those lines. But it should also, on the other hand, invite to socializing with humor and the light touch. We don't need to be too serious, too heavy-handed, too stiff upper lip. It's not necessary, and the students will not like that so much. So let us be serious, but also with a light tone and some humor. Now, in order to do this and manage all these requirements, we need a new way of developing. And the best way is to collaborate several people together. And we found some inspiration in the DevOps movement. That stands for development, where you develop a product, and then operations, where you sort of put them into practice. You run the system. And then we have, one has found that within software development that you combine development and operations and call that DevOps, where you plan, you code, you build, you test, and then you release and you operate and you monitor what's happening. But that is sort of going together, and that is very much the same logic that is part of the PISA model, where we develop material, we use it with students, we analyze what happens, and then we feed back into the process what we experience, and maybe also contributions from the students into that. Now, in order to harness that, to organize that, to conduct such processes, we have taken inspiration from a visual formalism or a graphical way of presentation called Tech Radar. But we modify it and call it a text radar. And as you can see here, we have sort of a radar metaphor with quadrants and blips on this, and there are some circles. And we use that visual formalism, and let it correspond to new kind of qualities in the work that we are doing. So imagine here we have a 4-quadrant text radar, and then all the blips here are textual components, because there are various kinds of those. As we talked about before, we have the written text of web pages, we have the audio visuals, video, audio, still images, animations. We have also interactive learning objects. And we introduce a 4th text type called paratext, that is sort of roundabout text that is not part of the course material proper, but it is like references, it's explanation on how this text is going to be used, and so on and so forth. And it's useful to have this sort of around text as well as the courseware proper. Now, when we start the work, we have put a lot of these blips or textual fragments in the outer circle. That represents ideas that might, come and you jot down something, or maybe work together where many people throw ideas on the blackboard. And then we engage in a movement towards acceptance for publication with several stages. So there's an outer circle, there's a next to outer circle, there next to inner circle, and the inner circle. That's where those textual components are accepted for publication. And we want to move from this situation where we have a lot of these texts in the outer rim, move through that and into a system where all of or most of the text elements, the pages, the videos, and so on and so forth, are accepted for publication, and the document is almost ready. Now we have some visual tools to work with this, and here you see a software online which do that. And then we can add all these components here, all these textual components. They can be added here in this diagram. It's a Google spreadsheet, and you give them the name. And that corresponds to what you will find in the graph as the sheet. Now, it's possible to have several sheets in the same Google spreadsheet, and they can correspond to different states of this diagram. So you can follow the process over time. So as a matter of fact, what we are dealing with here is that we add to these textual element the names and a description. That might be the full text for that matter, or it can be a description about what it's going to be about. And then we have 4 quadrants representing the 4 textual types: the types, web page, audiovisual, interactive learning object, and paratext. And then we move through a stepwise movement towards the inner circle in terms of states of the textual components themselves. So we have 2 levels of states. One is the state of each textual element, and one is the state of the overall document. So here is the final graph for that. We build this spreadsheet and have different sheets for certain points in time where we do the development work. We start with many ideas out here, move towards the center, divide that between different people maybe, and then end up with something that we agree upon that should be part of the final document. And in parallel with this, we also work on the structure and relationship between both the text and the paratext and the table of contents and the balance of the tree and the elements of video versus the written text, etc., etc. But that we should deal with in another context. Thank you for your attention.